The linear arbor divides which muscle into two? What's the nerve supply of the external oblique muscle? Which of the muscle of the anterolateral abdominal wall is vertical? Let's see. Alright, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Here is another anatomy lesson for medical students and health related science students, and from the title it's anterolateral abdominal wall. So most people would just prefer to say anterior abdominal wall. Please, I would rather say anterolateral abdominal wall because we're also talking about what's in the lateral part of the body. That's what's in this lateral part. Do you get? If you've not watched my video on anatomical terms, position and description, please, I'm going to link that video up there, so check it out so that you would understand why I'm saying anterior lateral and the posterior abdominal wall. I hope you know how to answer anatomy questions. You don't just start talking from anywhere. You have to have an outline and you have to present your work nicely. If you're not doing this in your anatomy exams, I feel that's one of the reasons why you're not passing anatomy so well. So if you also want me to do a video on how to answer anatomy questions, drop on the comment section so I should know if I'm going to put up that video on my channel. So for this video, I've got out the outline which you should use to answer your anatomy questions. Starting from the introduction, you flow to the function, the layers, and in the layers you talk about the skin, the superficial fascia, the muscle and the associated fascia, and the parietal peritoneum. Then you move over to the clinicals, and that's all about the anterolateral abdominal wall. So we're going to be starting from the introduction. Good. Introduction can be like the definition of the anterolateral abdominal wall. Good. So the anterolateral abdominal wall is a musculo-aponeurotic wall. Now, if you look at this model, all these white places are showing aponeurotic wall. It's made up of muscles and the aponeurosis. You've gotten that right. Good. So it's made up of a musculo-aponeurotic wall that covers the abdominal cavity. If you agree with me, if I take out this muscle, like I'm removing this muscle, you can see that what we have left is the abdominal organs. If you've not watched my video on abdominal organs, please make sure you check that video. I'm going to link the video up there too, so watch the videos. That is about the introduction. So move straight to the function. The function of the anterolateral wall, from what I have shown you, you should be able to always remember one function, which is it protects the abdominal viscera, which I have covered back. So if it's covering the abdominal viscera, of course it's going to protect the abdominal viscera. So that's point number one. Point number two still has to do with the abdominal viscera. You agree that it keeps it firm. Point number three, it assists in forceful expiration. Point number four, the anterolateral abdominal wall is involved in coughing, vomiting, defecation, or we can say is involved in actions that increase the intra-abdominal pressure. Now the next thing on our outline is the layers. Good. So the layers, there are four layers. The first layer is the skin, the superficial fascia, the muscles, and the parietal peritoneum. I don't cram this because I'm visualizing it. I don't know if you get. I'm not looking from anywhere. The first thing when you see the anterolateral abdominal wall is the skin. When you take off the skin, the next thing is the fascia. Now, if you leave out the fascia, the next thing you will see is the muscle. Then when you take out the muscle, you will see the peritoneum that is covering the abdominal viscera. You know peritoneum is also divided into two, visceral and parietal. Good. So you see the parietal peritoneum next. So these are the layers. So we're going to be talking about the layers one after the other. First of all, the skin is capable to stretch. That's why in pregnancy you see that the baby is there and the skin is able to stretch out. You get it? So that's about the skin. Then the next thing is the superficial fascia. Now some students, what they do is when they hear superficial fascia of the anterior abdominal wall, they are always clinging to campus fascia and scarpus fascia. Good. But it is dependent on something. That's the location. And what is the landmark of our location is this umbilicus. We have above the umbilicus and below the umbilicus. These are umbilicus. So below, that's where you see the campus and scarpus. So if you're dissecting a body, you shouldn't be expecting to see campus and scarpus fascia here. What you just see is the thin connective tissue that is continuous with the superficial fascia of the rest part of the body. Do you get it? Then below the umbilicus, that's where you have the campus and the scarpus fascia. I hope I've clarified something. So I don't expect you to just loud Campo and Carpus fascia. Okay, for MCQ purpose, you can see it in your MCQ exam. Now, the Campus fascia is what you see first. C before S. Okay, if you're reading letter A to Z, A, B, C, you have letter C before S. S is like down, 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 close to Z. You get. So C before S. You have the Campus fascia before you have the Carpus fascia. So the Campus fascia is a bit, is the superficial one, while the Carpus fascia is the deep one. The Campus fascia is fatty, while the Carpus fascia is like membranous. You've gotten that. So there's something you might not have been taught. This fascia contains fat. This fat is what accumulates in the lower part of the abdomen after puberty. We also have cutaneous nerve. It contains cutaneous vesicles and also contains superficial lymphatics. Good. Now moving over to the muscles, there are 5 muscles that makes up this anterolateral abdominal wall. Good. And these 5 muscles, they are grouped into 2. We have the flat muscles and we have the vertical muscles. Now the flat muscles are the muscles that are situated laterally. You get. While the vertical muscles, they are near the midline. This midline, they are near the midline. So if you are trying to recollect which is the vertical and which is the flat, you remember a vertical line. You remember horizontal. So vertical is close to the what? Midline. While the flat muscles, they are just at the lateral part. Now let's now fix in the muscles into these 2 groups. For the flat muscles, we have the external oblique muscle, the first one you see here. The external oblique muscles. This is it. Now when you remove the external oblique muscle, the next you see is the internal oblique muscle. Then below, that's when you also remove the internal oblique muscle, you see the transversus abdominis muscle. But for the vertical muscles, one that are close to the midline, you have the rectus abdominis muscle. Now we have the pyramidalis muscle. It's around here. It's not usually in every individual. You don't see it in every individual, but it's close to the midline here. You've gotten that right? Good. So each flat muscle form an aponeurosis. Like all those white stuff, for instance, let's assume them to be the aponeurosis. The aponeurosis covers the rectus abdominis muscles, the aponeurosis of the flat muscle. You remember the flat muscle, the external oblique, internal oblique, and the transversus abdominis. Now, their aponeurosis covers this rectus abdominis muscle. And also, the aponeurosis, will I say anastomose or entwined to form this linea alba in the midline. This is the linea alba. And if you remember from my introduction, I asked the linea alba divides which muscle into 2. This can also be an OBJ question or MCQ question. It divides the rectus abdominis muscle into what? 2. And let me chip something in. This thing you call 6 packs, please. It's not 6 packs. It has to do with this rectus abdominis tendinous insertion. You get. Okay, so for easy assimilation and retention, we're going to be talking about those muscles in the tabular form. I'm going to create 5 rows and 5 columns. So the rows is going to contain the muscles,